7 years after Game of Thrones ended, people are still arguing about the last 5 minutes. Jon Snow, secret Targaryen, walks through a gate and disappears into the snow. No crown, no throne, just a man in black boots heading north with people who used to hunt him. At the time, that felt like a punishment. A lot of viewers called it the biggest waste of a storyline in television history. Here's the thing, though. House of the Dragon has spent 3 seasons quietly filling in a 200-year-old backstory that changes what that final walk actually means. And this year's season did something the earlier seasons never quite dared to do. It connected that ancient backstory directly to Daenerys Targaryen, on screen, in dialogue. Once you put that new piece next to everything Jon Snow did in the original show, his ending stops looking like a demotion. It starts looking like the only ending that ever made sense. Let's get into why, and let's talk about what's actually happening with this franchise right now in 2026, because the real-world story is almost as tangled as the one on screen. Rewind 200 years before Jon Snow is even a rumor. Aegon the Conqueror, the man who welded 3 kingdoms together with dragon fire, has a dream. Not a vague nightmare. A specific, detailed vision of a winter that never ends, arriving from the far north, cold enough to erase every living person on the continent. In his vision, there's exactly one thing standing between humanity and extinction. A Targaryen on the Iron Throne, keeping the realm unified enough to fight back when that darkness finally shows up. Aegon didn't put this in a speech. He treated it like a state secret and passed it down privately, ruler to heir, for 2 centuries. House of the Dragon shows us the moment it gets passed to Rhaenyra, and you can watch her whole understanding of her family's purpose shift in real time. The throne was never really about wealth or bloodlines. It was survival insurance for a threat nobody else even knew existed. Now here's the update from this year. In House of the Dragon's 3rd season, Daemon Targaryen describes a vision of his own from Harrenhal, and it isn't vague either. He describes seeing a young woman with silver hair, far away, with dragons close to her. The show is no longer hinting that this prophecy connects to Daenerys. It's saying so, out loud, 3 seasons deep into a prequel that most people assumed would stay in its own lane. That's a big deal for anyone who thought the prophecy angle was just fan theory glue holding 2 separate shows together. It isn't glue. It's the spine. Jon's father, Rhaegar Targaryen, spent years buried in old scrolls and prophecy texts, and by most accounts he became convinced this ancient vision was about to come true in his own lifetime. He believed a child of his would be the one to fulfill it. His first son, with his wife Elia Martell, gets the name Aegon. That's not a coincidence. That's a man naming his child after the original king who had the dream, as if he's trying to will the prophecy into existence. Then Rhaegar meets Lyanna Stark, and their son gets hidden, protected, and raised under a different name entirely. A boy with ice in his blood on one side and fire on the other, growing up thinking he's nobody's heir at all. By the time Lyanna tells her brother Ned the truth in her final moments, she doesn't ask him to put the baby on a throne. She asks him to protect him. Full stop. Because if the wrong people find out a Targaryen heir is alive, that baby doesn't survive the year. So Jon Snow grows up as the outsider at his own family's table. No official name, no real place, and somehow, that overlooked kid ends up standing at the center of the most consequential conflict in the entire story. Here's what gets skipped over a lot. Jon's time as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch isn't just a leadership arc. It's the actual fulfillment of Aegon's dream, happening in slow motion, mostly off-page from what anyone in King's Landing cares about. He opens the gates for the wildlings. He goes to Hardhome and watches thousands of people die, trying to save who he can. Almost everyone around him thinks he's lost his mind. What he understands, and almost nobody south of the Wall wants to hear, is that survival requires everyone. Not just lords with armies. Everyone. That is exactly the unity Aegon's vision demanded. Not a coronation. A coalition. By the time the actual battle against the dead happens, Jon has already done the hard part. The wildlings trust him because he bled for them. The northern lords follow him because he earned it. Daenerys brings her dragons and her armies into the fight largely because of him. Arya lands the final blow, and that matters, but none of it happens without years of Jon quietly stitching together people who used to be enemies. The prophecy was never really about who swings the killing blow. It was about who builds the alliance that makes the killing blow possible. That's Jon's actual job in this story, whether the show ever says it in so many words or not. So if Jon fulfilled the prophecy, why doesn't he get the throne? Because the show has spent close to a decade proving the throne is closer to a curse than a reward. The Mad King loses his mind on it. Robert Baratheon rots from the inside out sitting near it. Cersei burns half a city trying to hold on to it. Daenerys, who believed her whole life she was destined for it, becomes the exact tyrant she swore to end the moment she's close enough to touch it. House of the Dragon has been building the same pattern from the other direction, and this year's season pushes it even further. The show's own writers have described Rhaenyra's arc in Season 3 as a turn toward tyranny, driven partly by her own growing obsession with being the one who fulfills Aegon's dream. The same prophecy that was supposed to save the realm is what starts pulling her toward the kind of ruthlessness that gets her compared to some of the worst monarchs in her family's history. Every single Targaryen succession in this franchise ends in blood. Every argument over who deserves the chair costs lives and burns cities and distracts the family from the one job the throne was actually built for. The Dance of the Dragons alone kills dragons on both sides and cripples the dynasty for generations. All of that, over a seat made of melted-down swords. Jon is the one Targaryen in this entire saga who does the job the prophecy actually demanded and then walks away from the reward without a fight. That's not an accident. That's the entire point of the character. Look at what Jon actually does in the finale. He kills Daenerys, the woman he loves, because she just burned innocent people alive and he knows she'll do it again. That's not a bid for power. That's the hardest possible choice, made for the people, not for himself. His reward is a dungeon cell, a trial he barely survives, and exile beyond the wall. The lords of Westeros can't execute him without risking a war with the Unsullied. They can't let him stay without risking exactly the kind of succession crisis that's been burning the realm for 200 years. So they send him to the one place where none of that politics matters anymore. Watch that final scene again with fresh eyes. Jon doesn't leave in despair. He looks back once, and then he turns north and walks into the trees with people who used to be strangers to him. That's not a punishment dressed up as an ending. That's a man being handed the one thing nobody else in this story ever gets. A life after the war that isn't shaped by anyone else's expectations. His own brothers in black clothes that gate behind him almost like they're thanking him, not exiling him. They're freeing him from a crown that has destroyed everyone who's worn it. Layer Aegon's dream over that image one more time. The threat was always going to come from beyond the wall. The real border in this story was never the edges of the Seven Kingdoms. It was the wall itself. Jon is the only character built from both sides of that border, the ice and the fire, and once the job south of the wall is finished, the next version of that same duty is waiting for him on the other side of it. When Drogon melts the Iron Throne down to slag after Daenerys dies, a lot of people read that as an animal grieving. There's a cleaner reading available now. That throne was forged as a weapon for a 200-year war. The war just ended. The throne had done its job, and there was nothing left for it to protect anyone from. Burning it isn't rage. It's retirement. Here's where this gets genuinely interesting, because the story off-screen has basically been replaying the same argument. For years, HBO explored a direct sequel following Jon Snow Beyond the Wall. Reports about it started back in 2022. According to later reporting, Kit Harington's actual pitch for that show was dark. He wanted to play Jon as a broken man years later, dealing with the weight of everything he'd survived, stripped of his sword and his dire wolf, spending his days building small cabins just to tear them back down. Reportedly, HBO felt that version was too bleak for the audience, and by 2024 the whole project had been shelved. Then, earlier this year, reporting surfaced that the idea was quietly being revived, with a new writer attached and speculation that Arya Stark could even factor into the story. Kit Harington notably had not signed back on. By spring, at a fan convention, Harington gave his clearest answer yet. He said the project was effectively on hold, and that on some level, he already believes Jon's story ended exactly where it needed to. Not because there's nothing left to explore, but because dragging him back toward the spotlight might undo the whole point of where the character landed. Notice the pattern. The real-world production kept trying to pull Jon Snow back toward center stage, and the person who actually plays him kept saying that's not where this character belongs. That's almost too fitting considering everything we just walked through. Meanwhile, HBO has effectively handed its flagship attention to a different corner of this universe. Earlier this year, the network introduced a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and its new lead, Ser Duncan the Tall, in a way that plenty of outlets described as a soft replacement for Jon Snow as the franchise's next big face. And House of the Dragon's third season, currently airing, has drawn strong reviews for finally picking up its pace and paying off years of prophecy setup. As for the actual books, where all of this originates, patience is still the only option. George R.R. Martin has spent years giving conflicting updates on the Winds of Winter, at various points describing it as roughly three-quarters finished, then acknowledging long stretches with no real progress at all. As of this year, fans have now passed more than 5,500 days since the last mainline novel was published. Martin is expected to make a public appearance at a major science fiction convention this year, and fans are, predictably, hoping for news. Whether he delivers real updates on the book or just another good-natured deflection remains to be seen. So the honest answer is that nobody actually knows how Jon's story concludes in George R.R. Martin's original version. The show gave us one ending. The books may eventually give us a different one, or a deeper one, or possibly no ending at all if the wait continues at this pace. Until that day comes, the show's version is the closest thing to a finished answer we have, and it holds up a lot better than people gave it credit for in 2019. Jon Snow didn't lose the throne. He was never supposed to sit on it in the first place. He fulfilled a promise made 200 years before he was born, and then he walked away before that promise could do to him what it's done to every other Targaryen who ever touched it. That's not a consolation prize. That's the only ending that was ever actually available to a character built entirely around duty over comfort. If this changed how you look at that final scene, there's a lot more of this kind of breakdown coming, so consider sticking around for it. And I'm genuinely curious where you land on this. Does Jon's ending hold up better now that House of the Dragon has filled in the gaps? Or does the show still owe him a better send-off? Put your take in the comments. I read them.